Okay. Hi, and welcome to Noise Violation Podcast. Today we have the founder of Nothing Much Happens, a popular podcast for bedtime stories for grown-ups. Please welcome Kathryn Nicolai. Kathryn, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so where did this idea come from? Stories about nothing.
A couple different places. One is that I've used this technique of telling stories to relax and fall asleep my whole life. It's one of my earliest memories. So it's something that I've always done for myself and felt like I sort of had the secret superpower that other people don't have. And so especially as getting older and hearing from my yoga students and my friends and family, all the trouble they have sleeping, and I kept thinking, I know how to fix this. Like, I know what to do, but I couldn't really figure a way to translate that into sort of a mass useful medium. And I'd been working on it sort of as a book for a little while, but it was just so far away from becoming a reality. And I was actually up one night, ironically, in the middle of the night with a sick dog and just thinking about it. And I thought, it's a podcast. I already have a yoga podcast as well, so I'm a little familiar with the technology. And I just thought I could start right now as a podcast. And I ordered a microphone in the middle of the night, and we launched about 5 weeks later.
Awesome. So to take it all the way back, do you remember when you're coming up with stories, were you writing them down? Were you just kind of imagining them in your head more visually? Like what was that?
I always imagine them, and I actually don't have any visual imagination. I have a condition called aphantasia, which means that I don't have an inner eye and I can't visualize anything. So it was always, maybe that's part of where the storytelling came from. It always had to have like a through line of narrative because it's not rooted in visual imagery for me. And I never wrote them down until I decided to start sharing them with other people. And the ones that exist now were written for the podcast. There are a couple, though, that were rooted in stories I'd been telling myself. And a lot of those are in the first season. The very first story, A Block from Home, was definitely a story I told myself for a long time. And I talk about a lot in the podcast how it is a form of brain training. So you do get better at it over time. And so for probably a year or so, all I would have to do is say in my own head, a block from home, and I'd be out. So, but I kind of ran through those stories in the first season, and then it was creatively fun to, branch out a little bit.
Yeah, so what's kind of your process now? Do you write them down and keep adding details and then tweaking them, or how does that work?
I keep a list of things that inspire me. Sometimes there are just small details or ideas that I'd like to flesh out. But when it's time for me to sit down and write, and I keep to really regular writing days, I heard I feel like this is a Kurt Vonnegut thing that he said years ago about writers, that there are two kinds of writers, bashers and swoopers. And bashers go one word at a time until it's correct. And swoopers come back and forth until they find the thing. And I'm a basher for sure. I just go through it until it's done. So on those writing days, I might scroll through my list of here's some things that have inspired me lately, and then start, and I write till I'm done. and then I usually don't really edit it a lot. I usually come back the next week to record it, and always with the idea that I'll edit it. But there must have been some logic to the way it was written the first time, because usually that's the only way I can see that it would be.
Yeah, so do you stick to the script pretty good? Do you freestyle or ad-lib anything?
There's no there's not really room for that, because it needs to sound so, first of all, because I repeat it. I read the story twice, but there really isn't room for that. It needs to feel like this thing that's really been sturdily created so that my listener can climb inside of it and have a good place to rest.
And before you, I guess, record it, live for the show, is there a certain space that you're thinking about? Like, how do you know what kind of voice tone to use that works better? How did you find that sweet spot?
I think I found that by being a yoga teacher. So I've been a full-time yoga teacher for 17 years. So I spend a lot of time using my voice to explain to people how to shift not only their bodies, but their minds into a different space. So I already feel like those instincts are very well honed. So I mostly just trust those instincts. But my listeners do point out that the first season sounds a lot different than any season after that. So I feel like I kind of found a different pace after the first season that worked better for me. And a lot of times people actually say, can you go back and re-record the first season sort of in the way that you do it now? I'm sure that will happen at some point.
Oh, wow. So revamp the old. So
Yeah.
yeah. Is there one, I guess the Block from Home was your original. Is there another one that kind of sticks out as one of your favorites?
There's several. Um, I really love Fireflies on a Summer Night, which came out last summer and felt really personal to me. And that was one of those ones that I just sat down with no idea what was coming and wrote it out almost without deleting a word. Like it just came out that way. And I just felt really connected when I wrote it. I also, there's this, a lot of times people take them very literally as if I am recounting a journal entry and that the stories are my real life experiences. And they're not, they're fiction. My real life is wonderful, but that's not my life. But there are a few elements that are from my life. And so whenever I talk about Italy in the podcast, that is from my real life. I lived in Italy for a year. I speak Italian and I feel very Italian, although I'm not Italian at all. And so when I write stories that involve that, those are always favorites for me.
Yeah. So do you actually listen to them as you go to sleep? Is it, or do you do anything?
It's a little too meta for me to listen to myself.
Yeah.
And I think it's difficult to step out of the place of an editor's ear or wondering how it's landing for someone else. So for me, it really can't work that way. But the good news is it doesn't need to, because I have this technique that I've trained my brain in. I just find another story that I haven't told you yet and start leaning into those details, and I sleep like a baby.
Okay. And then were you self-taught, or did you go to school and be like an English major? Like the grammar and syntax and the imagery that you use is very beautiful. So it's like, how did you learn that?
I guess that just comes from being a reader who really loves that. I got my degree in Spanish with a minor in linguistics. And I love Spanish very much, but I think that was mostly because the school I went to didn't have Italian. So, and I had lived in Italy as a 16-year-old. So by the time I got to college, I was like, give me more language. But I didn't, and I love taking English, my English lit classes and all that stuff, but I'd never really considered it as an option for me. And I think that one of the gifts of starting to get a little bit older is that you kind of go, you know, what the hell, I'll just try. I think when you're younger, you're a little bit more vulnerable to and self-conscious about not being the best at something, and that can often shut you down. And I think, at least for me, as I got older, I found that I didn't have to be the best at something. I could still just try and create because I wanted to. And so that's really, I just thought, you know, what the hell, I'll just try. I'll put it out there. Maybe no one will listen, but I'll go for it.
Yeah. And so, I mean, did you have another job? I mean, the yoga teaching, did that provide you with an income to let you take these chances on the podcast? Is that?
I own a studio. So,
Uh-huh.
and I've owned a studio for 14 years. Of course, right now, everything is different. My studio is closed, and I'm teaching online Zoom classes to my students and doing my yoga podcast as well. But it did give me some space. And because at least initially stepping into podcasts isn't a very expensive approach to your medium. I mean, there are certainly a lot more expensive ways to create art. So it felt really approachable to me. And I thought, and even Bob Wittersheim, who does my audio engineering, is a friend of mine and just helped me out at the beginning. So I was able to just go, let me just throw this against the wall and see if it sticks. And he said, let's try it. And luckily it did.
Have you ever thought about animating some of them and doing like a YouTube for like a cartoon or something?
I actually can't say too much about that.
Oh,
Stay
exclusive.
tuned.
Awesome.
I think it's a great idea. I'll say that. I think it's a great idea. And I just keep thinking that the world of Nothing Much Happens will just keep finding new ways to help people. And I think that's a good one.
Yeah, it seems like definitely a good idea that can be marketed and expanded upon.
Mm-hmm.
So, for your yoga studio, how is that? How are you doing with that, with the COVID crisis going on right now? Is there a chance that you might open up for limited people, or how?
It's really hard to say. I was actually having a conversation with a couple other studio owners the other day. We actually closed before we were ordered to close, just because I thought ethically that we should. Because to me, I don't understand how we could safely open for quite a while. It's a closed space where people are breathing together. It seems like an ideal place to spread it.
Right.
So I think even when they lift restrictions, we're really going to have to think long and hard. The thing is, even if we let people in very small numbers, I'm not sure if that means that we can pay our rent. And I'm not sure if that's still keeping them safe. The heating's on or something, and that's helping to spread the droplets. I just don't know what the answer is. So right now we're just adapting. We're teaching online, and like everybody else, right? We're just trying to figure out how to adapt.
Yeah, I know I have a friend who works in retail, a manager of a retail store, and then they're using a temperature thermometer and taking everyone's temperature before they come in, and all their workers.
That's only if you have symptoms, right? 25% of people who have it don't have any symptoms. So you can take everybody's temperature and still have a whole room full of infected people. So that's the stuff that I feel like we don't know how to solve those issues yet. Are we going to wait till everybody has antibody tests? Maybe, because those people we would probably have some immunity. It's a very confusing new world.
It is, and it kind of pushes everyone more digital. And so are you kind of building up around a more digital first platform?
For the yoga studio?
Yeah.
Every week that goes by, I think we'll just keep increasing the amount of Zoom classes. We just didn't know what the response would be, but it's good. People want it. So, if we can get back to teaching anywhere near the number of classes we were teaching before, which was probably 6 or 7 a day, that would be fantastic. But right now we're not there yet. But I think we'll just keep figuring it out, turning toward digital stuff, because I think even when we go back to normal, we're not taking everything with us. Not everything is going to come back the way that it was, and maybe that's not a bad thing at all. But I think probably digital online classes are going to always be part of studios from now on.
Yeah, then I guess how do you plan to monetize that? Is it like a subscription? Is it per class? Is it
I feel like that's a little bit to be decided yet. Right now we're just going by class, but I feel like we're going to need a few more weeks of information before we can figure out if it's a better idea to have memberships. The lovely thing is that a lot of our students asked to just keep paying their membership fees, because they just want to make sure that we survive this. We're still paying our staff and paying our rent and paying our expenses. So luckily, our students, those that could afford to, said, just keep on charging me. And it's, even if I'm not getting the same services, I'm paying for the survival of something I care about.
Yeah, and so what are some of the benefits of yoga? So somebody's not doing yoga, or they're looking for, an in-home workout now that they can't go to the gym, what how do you sell yoga to people?
Um, it's a laundry list of benefits. It's so long. It's sort of comical because I think, we're to the point now as a society where we all kind of acknowledge that you need movement and exercise to have a healthy body. That's something that as a community, pretty much across society, we can go, yeah, everybody knows that. If you don't move your body, you're going to suffer. But if you kind of go back even 50 years, that wasn't an idea that everybody agreed with. And you might only have gone out running, for example, if you were an athlete, or only ever done any exercise if you played on a sports team. And then maybe you were done with that by the time you got out of college and you didn't do it again. But now it's pretty understood that everybody, for mental and physical well-being, needs to move their body around. And then yoga adds in this other element, which is mindfulness or non-judgmental awareness, which again, right now, not everybody thinks we need for mental health or even physical health. But I think in another 10, 15, 20 years, everyone will go, well, of course you need that. You need meditation, you need yoga, just like you need sleep, just like you need water, and you need good food, and you need friends. So yoga really combines those two of the mindfulness with physical activity. So obviously you get all the great benefits that you do from exercise. You build muscle tone and flexibility, and you're going to have more endurance, and you're going to have a healthier heart and healthier, stronger lungs, more mobile joints, and just feel better in your body. But then it also adds in this element of meditation that for a lot of people, even though they think it's a good idea, it's kind of like brushing your teeth or flossing your teeth, where you're like, I know I'm supposed to be doing this, I'm
Right.
not doing it. But the nice thing is that if the idea of sitting quietly on a cushion for 20 minutes intimidates, if you come to yoga, we'll teach you to meditate while you move. So I think that's a really, kind of big bang for your buck. You get both at the same time.
And is that everyone, I think, hears the word meditation and thinks of some like woo or magic or crystals or something. How do you explain meditation to people?
Yeah, I know it can seem really far out. I always feel like if you're not into crystals, I'm your teacher because I'm not either, and I'm kind of a skeptical minded person. I don't believe in much that I can't see. So I take an approach of like, where are the real world effects? How does it benefit me? How can I apply it day to day? And meditation in its simplest form is really just learning to pay attention in a different way. It's paying attention with less reactivity in your emotions. So you're training yourself over and over again to be in the present moment and not react. I always say to my students, it's like two ends of a pendulum. One is freaking out. Way on the other end of the pendulum is going numb. And most of us just swing back and forth between these responses. Something happens, there's some kind of trauma, or sometimes it's something very small, and we go one way or the other. We go for an addiction, we freak out, we've got to be soothed by something, we go totally numb, and we're not present in our bodies. But there's this other option right in the middle, and not many people even know it exists, called observation, where you train yourself, I'm not going to bail, I'm not going to go numb, I'm feeling this, but I'm also not freaking out or reacting. I'm just observing it. And each moment that I'm able to do that, I gain a little bit of ground in my brain, so that when the bigger, scarier moments that are happening outside of your yoga mat or meditation cushion come up, you can say, wait, I trained for this. I know what to do. I have a plan. And I've been working on meditation for 20 years. And I've so many times been able to calm myself down, get centered, make a better choice, not have to take something back out of anger, because I was able to stay in my body and stay calm. So I think that's sort of meditation with the woo-woo taken out. It's not magical or mystical. I always say it's better. It's natural.
And is it related at all to somebody who might be like hyperactive or attention deficit disorder? Is that something else, or does meditation help that as well?
I mean, I feel like meditation is useful to everybody. So like no matter where you land on any kind of spectrum, there's a way to practice. And, there might be a style of meditation that works better for you. Just like as for me, who can't visualize, a lot of times you get told to picture a scene and walk yourself through an experience. And I couldn't understand how to do that. I can't visualize anything. So I hear a lot of people with the same condition say, sort of in a defeated way, it must not be for me. Meditation, I can't do that. And I think probably for somebody who's hyperactive and the idea of just sitting still for 20 minutes just feels like a bridge too far, there's a way. It's not one path that we all walk together. It's a million paths in the same direction. So for a lot of people, I think, who find just being still too much, moving meditation, walking meditation, all that kind of stuff is a great way to do basically the same thing, to flex the same muscle in your brain, but just to find a way that it works for your brain.
Right. And I think of health and wellness and kind of the mind, the body, and then also like the diet, like what you're putting into yourself. Is there any sort of food or diets that you recommend to people?
I recommend that people get really in touch with their own body's intuition, because the body will tell you what it wants to eat. And when you stop interfering with it and shaming it and telling it what it should and shouldn't have and is okay and isn't okay, then you start to tap into your intuition, and your body absolutely will tell you through cravings what you should eat. I'm somebody who is recovered from an eating disorder that took away so much from me for so many years. And I want it to be part of my personal mission, especially as a yoga teacher, to just blow up diet culture and the idea of shoulds and shouldn'ts around food, and that there's a good way and a bad way, causes so many more problems than it solves. But the good news is, like, our bodies, before we got in the way and said, you can't have that, stop, you shouldn't eat that, this is bad, this is good, our bodies would have totally just gone, I'm craving this, I'm full, I'm all set, I want this, I don't want that. But we shut down that intuition. And a lot of times it gets shut down for us when we're a little kid. The first time you're at a table as a child and you get told, in this house we clean our plates, that's the moment your intuition just got disregarded. Mm-hmm. And that happens to us all the time. And I understand, like, well-meaning parents sometimes just need their kids to friggin' eat dinner. I get it, it's complicated. But I think that there's a big movement right now of understanding how much harm has been done to people physically and mentally by prescribing food. And I'm a vegan because ethically I don't think there's another way for me to be. But I'm never going to tell somebody you should eat this and you shouldn't eat that, because that made me really sick for a long time.
Wow. And so I had a psychologist on, and he said one of the biggest problems people have is that they don't love themselves enough. And so how did you get over the shaming of yourself and the eating disorder, and what were some of the things that you did to change that?
It's definitely a one step at a time, and sometimes you feel like you go backwards. But I have an excellent therapist. She helps me so much. I think therapy is wonderful. And I saw somebody posting the other day that said, like, reasons why you might want to see a therapist. And at the end, it just said, if you're an adult and you haven't yet. I was like, really? It's great for everybody. You'll find something useful, I promise. So my therapist has really helped me. Practices like self-compassion, which is a really specific, almost form of meditation, where basically you kind of break down the idea of, I'm only valuable if I look a certain way or produce a certain thing or show up in the world in a certain way, and realize that you deserve to have the same kind of compassion that you would extend to anybody else, that you should be included in that kind of loving kindness. So all of that has really helped me, doing a lot of reading and stuff and understanding eating disorders better and diet culture better, and why it's bullshit and harmful has all been really, really helpful. Even just figuring out who you're going to follow online, because that can be really toxic sometimes, that you're following somebody who is only perpetuating your disease, and maybe they aren't even conscious that they're sick. and instead finding people who are real role models who you can connect to. I think everyone should probably do a social media purge. If looking at that stuff does not make you feel better about who you are, unfollow.
Right. And I think it kind of ties along with meditation as well, and bringing awareness to even how you're treating yourself, or but to actually get that shift and change, I think is kind of one of the mysteries that I don't know is if you do have that negative voice or negative self-talk, to try to catch it and turn it into something positive, or
well, kind of like you just said, like the first step is just to be aware of it, because sometimes that chatter can go on and you don't even realize that you're listening, or the story that's being told in your head. Then just being able to say, oh, I'm doing that. Oh, that story's playing right now. And I found for myself, like going from where I existed before to like real self-love was not like a straight line that I could make in a quick step, but I could go to, I always tell people, when you're struggling to love yourself, okay, that might be a step too far today, but you can always respect yourself. And even just respecting the fact that you have needs, like you need to eat, you need to sleep, and you need safety, and you need exercise or sunshine or friendship or a phone call from someone. These are things that you can give yourself even on days where you don't feel like you love yourself at all. You can recognize, no matter what, just as by being a human being, you deserve respect.
Yeah, and I think you nailed it when you're saying the story that you tell yourself, and changing that story. And you being a great storyteller, what are some keys to a good story? How do you tell a great story?
My stories, because they're not plot driven, and there's not even characters, there aren't even names. It's really all about richness of detail. To me, that's always been the thing I'm really excited about. And I like mundane stuff. I always want to know, what you eat for dinner. What did you see on your walk today? I'm excited by that kind of stuff. And I remember I was taking a writing class right before I started writing the podcast, and I sent my professor, was an online class, an email, and I just said, can I write a book about nothing? And she was like, not really. I mean, people ask all the time, but it turns out you can. And I would often find that when I would read a book, I love to read, I read constantly, there'd be this short section at the beginning before the inciting incident, right? Before, like, say your character wakes up in the morning and they do their normal morning routine and drive to work. And that's when something happens that starts the whole movement of the novel. I almost didn't want that part to happen. I just wanted to hear about this part. And I don't know if that's just because I kind of crave sometimes like the safety and security of just normalcy and people living their everyday lives. So if you're that kind of a storyteller, the kind that I am, then you lean into detail and richness and kind of exposing the small things that we can easily lose sight of, but provide us with a ton of joy.
And as you're writing them, do you think about like the senses, like seeing and hearing, or is there one that sticks out more than the other?
I think probably, I mean, I definitely do think about that a lot, because that's kind of part of meditation, is just noticing we call it your sense doors, what touches your sense doors, because that's information about the present moment. What can I smell? What can I taste? What can I see? And then we know that memory is very strongly tied to scent. And also, as somebody who is trained to breathe very deep, I probably write way too much about the way the air smells. I might go out for a walk or something. And then how things look and how they taste. I write a lot about food. I want to help give people a positive experience with food that's not rooted at all in guilt or shame, but in the real joy of eating when it sounds good to you, what sounds good to you. So I think I probably write about those guys the most.
And are you trying to provoke any emotions in people as well, or
sometimes? I mean, sometimes the stories can be quite sentimental, and people will tell me that they cry hearing them. A lot of the ones that involve family or romance or holidays, or sometimes being alone, but there's something maybe I can evoke that is really relatable. That's what I try to do the most, is to make things even emotionally quite relatable. So, you might have noticed that I don't use gender markers in any stories that have relationships. And that's because I want whoever's listening to it to be able to think of themselves in the story and the person that they might have romantic feelings for as the other person. So I leave gender completely out of that, because I want people to go, oh, this story is about me. Because that's, I think, what helps people pull it around them like a blanket and be able to sleep. So I think I do try to evoke some emotion, but it should always be something relatable where you can go, I've been there, I've felt that way. And just having it kind of called out makes me feel seen.
Mm-hmm. And you have over almost 2,500 5-star reviews on iTunes, which is amazing. Congratulations.
Thank you.
How did you kind of build that? Did you have a team around you? What was it like, the journey on that?
I get asked this a lot, and I wish I had a more actionable set of advice for people. Mostly, I think I got lucky. Lucky in the sense that somebody saw it at Apple, because within the first 10 days of it being released, it was put on New and Noteworthy podcasts, which is a place that a lot of people see podcasts. I think the not lucky, the hard work part of it for me was recognizing there was a need and then being able to fill it with something quality. There's a lot of other sleep podcasts, but sometimes they don't fill that quality need the way that listeners respond to. I think that that's something that sets Nothing Much Happens apart, is that it is consistent, it's quality, it's thought out, even things like gender marker, to just have people say to me, I felt like included, and I realized you must have thought about that. That kind of quality, I think, is what really helps push it forward. So right now we get about 1.4 or more million downloads per month. And that's a lot of people. And I'm just so grateful, especially right now when people so desperately need comfort and sanctuary, just to be able to provide them with that and to help them get a good night's sleep.
And have you put any money towards marketing? Is it all word of mouth, or the big New and Noteworthy? Was there any big moments you remember as you're building?
I haven't put any money into it. I haven't spent any money on marketing at all. So it has been through word of mouth. And Apple has promoted us a couple different times, which was really exciting. Last year during Pride, because I'm a queer creator, our podcast was recognized as being done by a queer creator. A couple times stories have been featured at holidays. I think we had like a New Year's feature for a New Year's story and a Thanksgiving feature. And that's really exciting. Although I have to say most of my listeners listen on Spotify and aren't even on Apple. But I think for a lot of podcast creators, we kind of think of it as a prestigious thing to be recognized by Apple. I think once you've been on Apple for a little while, you realize like the algorithm doesn't actually have anything to do with the number of downloads though. So, you just kind of learn really quick that sometimes it just seems like a fluke that you're on a chart. I remember the first time I actually hit number 2 or number 1 on Canada's all over Apple charts, and I couldn't see it, so I had to have a friend in Canada take a screenshot and send it to me. That was kind of a moment where I was like, wow, I'm number 1, and Conan O'Brien is number 8. I kind of want to send him an email like, don't give up, kid, one day. But then you realize 12 hours later, you're number 74. So you just have to kind of realize why you're doing it. I'm doing it because I want to help people sleep. And it's awfully nice to get some accolades or be recognized. But even if I was just helping one person sleep, I keep doing it for them.
Yeah. And have you researched or done any like behind any science about the sleep part, or
Yeah.
you're just telling stories? I guess, how can you explain sleep better?
Yeah. Well, I have sort of my own instinct and what I know works, but it's definitely part of what I do as a yoga teacher is just to understand brain science better and understand people's nervous systems better. So especially right now, our nervous systems are in general just jacked because we're like having this fight or flight response that is just getting hit all the time. And the opposite of that is the rest and digest response, or the parasympathetic nervous system response. So we need to shift over in order to be able to sleep. But a lot of times we're like doom scrolling, and reading very upsetting things, and there isn't really a route there for the nervous system to shift. So when we teach yoga, when we help people turn on their relaxation response in the nervous system, we know that it only requires a couple of things. One is a steady point of focus, which if you're meditating, it might be your breath or a word or a phrase or an image, or it could be the narrative of a story. And then you need to have a sort of relaxed attitude. We call it a passive, oh, well attitude. My mind wanders, oh, well, I'll try again. And the third thing is it only takes a little bit of time, for most people 12 to 15 minutes, and they're going to shift their nervous system over. So knowing all of that as a yoga teacher, I kind of had some information about how long to make my story, what I needed to do. I needed to give people a point of focus that was steady. And you've probably had this experience where you're laying in bed and you're reading a book, and maybe you're in like a really uncomfortable position, but you can't stay awake. Like you keep dropping the book. Then you put the book down, you turn the light off, you get as comfortable as you have ever been, and you can't sleep. And that's because in that moment, instead of having that steady point of focus, your eyes moving, sometimes you're not even really reading. It's just that your eyes are moving over the page. You can't remember it the next day. But that's been replaced now by a thinking mind. Okay, well, we broke the magic spell. So that's, I think, particularly why the podcast is so useful, is you can listen to it without any lights on, without having to look at anything. You don't have to adjust your body at all. You can be ready for sleep. And then I provide that steady point of focus and you fall asleep. So that's really the magic of it. The brain training element is really just understanding a little bit about neuroplasticity, which just means that neurons that fire together wire together. So basically, if we can start doing behaviors that we want to see more of in the future, we're going to train that link to happen. So we need to train the body to respond a certain way when it's time for bed. And so we do that basically by repeating over and over these same habits. I'm going to get comfortable. I'm going to turn everything off. I'm going to take my 2 big breaths. And that's why people tell me it gets better and better and better, and they can't even hear the beginning of the story. I don't even get a minute into it and they're out.
Yeah, I get about 30 seconds in, and I don't think I've ever finished an episode.
Yeah, I hear that a lot. Sometimes people are like, I only get to where you say your name. I'm like, that's 10 seconds in. I'm getting good at this.
Yeah. Would it be possible to do the opposite, to, like wake somebody up, or like,
yeah,
kind of stimulate the mind?
Mm-hmm. I think it definitely would be. I feel like, a lot of meditation forms are actually that. It's not that you have to switch the nervous system. You can keep the nervous system really calm, but you can get more focused, which is really what happens when we do yoga, or even when a lot of athletes report sort of being in the zone. They're experiencing the same thing. They're so steadily focused on what's happening moment to moment that sort of time drifts away, random thoughts get blocked out, and they're really alert, but they're also really calm. So I think it could be done. I don't know. I haven't thought about how it could be applied to a podcast, but I'm sure there's a way.
Yeah, I was just thinking, it's like I've listened to podcasts or something when I'm working out, to some sort of way to that focus. Maybe that's music, and music already does that.
Right?
What about? I just lost my train of thought. Tell us about the book and how that, your process and what that's going to be about.
I'm so excited about that. So that will actually get officially announced this Monday, which is Monday the 4th. Like I said, I'd always thought it was going to be a book. and I never given up on that. So I reached out to an agent, a literary agent, and we worked on a book proposal together and created this really lovely book. It's got recipes and some craft activities and meditations. It's beautifully illustrated. It has some familiar stories that I think people will want to read and see the illustrations of. And it has 16 new stories that will never be on the podcast that are special to the book. And the response internationally was amazing. I sold it to 29 countries. And I'm being published by Penguin in the US and the UK, and then it's just all over the world. And it was really lovely to hear from so many excited publishers who were just saying, this seems really timely. And it seemed really timely way back in October when we just were thinking, boy, people are really stressed out. People really need to find a way to transition to better sleep at night. And now it's 10 times more relevant, I feel like. So it's going to come out in October of this year. It'll be everywhere you can buy books, all over the world. I'm really, really proud of it. It is absolutely the biggest dream of my life coming true.
Awesome. Congratulations.
Thank you.
So there's an audio book too, correct?
There is, and I am reading that, so it'll be on Audible and anywhere else that you get audiobooks.
And have you done that part yet? Have you read it?
I haven't done that part, but we are re-recording everything so it has a continuity. And I said to my editor, my audio engineer, Bob, just because I do have a setup here in the house and I could record it, but I have 2 dogs that bark a lot and I live right next to a busy road. So even when I record an episode, sometimes it takes me quite a while. I have to stop a lot and wait. And he just said, friends don't let friends record audiobooks in their basement. And I said, thank you. So I will go. He works at a professional studio. So I arranged with Penguin to record with him. And that will probably happen. I mean, assuming that such a place could be open for business, I think that'll happen in July.
Okay. Awesome. And everyone's working from home now, it seems, for the foreseeable future. Do you have any tips from working from home, like how to focus or?
You know, I found for myself, because I'm not used to really working from home, even when I write, I usually go somewhere else to write. Is the one thing I've noticed right now is that I have to have a stop time where I stop answering emails, because I get a lot of emails from the podcast and from my editors and all that stuff, but I also get a lot of emails about yoga classes. And I could just sit there and answer them all night. And there has to be a boundary here. So for me, that's been really useful, is to just set a timer. When am I going to be done? And even when am I going to start? I don't have to start right at first thing in the morning. I can do some stuff around the house and go for a walk, go for a run, or do some yoga. But by 9 o'clock, I have to start.
Mm-hmm.
That kind of thing. And then by 6 o'clock, she's done. And it also kind of put it in perspective for me. I tend to have that feeling like if somebody has asked me a question, I have to answer it right now. I'm not dealing in life or death stuff. You know, I'm not on the front lines, and a lot of us aren't. So if you find yourself kind of telling a story in your head about people needing you to get back to them right away, or what that says about you and your efficiency, it's all nonsense. Everything can wait till you have your own time.
And was this a dream before it happened? I guess it was. What did you need coaching to start it up? Did you ever doubt yourself or anything like that?
I didn't really. And you know, years ago, I had this really good friend. Her name was Renee, and she was diagnosed with breast cancer when she was a young woman, and she passed away a young woman. And before she passed away, a couple months before, she called me and she just said, listen, you have to make your dreams come true. And I kind of went, oh, right, Renee, yeah, I know. And she was like, no. You have to make your dreams come true. Don't blow me off. This is what you have to do. And it really stuck with me ever since then, to think about, what am I doing day to day to make my dreams come true? And the really startling thing at the beginning was I didn't know what my dreams were. I was like a robot that did chores and was just trying to get to the next day and get the laundry done. And so I had to spend some time figuring out, what are my dreams? And then every day chiseling away, even to start the podcast. That was certainly a dream. And I did. What's that?
What did you have a process for figuring that out? Were you journaling, or just keep asking yourself? And
yeah, I mean, I feel like, and this might not be true for everybody, but I always think of it as a question mark space that I can open up inside my mind or heart. And it's usually, the question is sort of like, what should I be focusing on right now? What needs my attention? And as soon as I open that space up, within like a second, something will step up and raise its hand and go, you need to pay attention to me right now. So I feel like I have, a lot of times we're kind of fingers in our ears. We can't hear the stuff because it's inconvenient. We don't want to be burdened with the responsibility of dealing with all of our stuff. But because that's my job as a yoga teacher, it does keep my nose to the grindstone. So I would just be constantly kind of opening up that space and going, like, what is missing? Where does this heart want to go? What does it want to create? And that I had wanted to be more creative and do creative things was a big thing for me. So that was sort of the podcast. And I didn't really question it. I just thought, what the hell, I'll try it. And I don't really care if anybody digs it or not. And then with the book, that was a little more intimidating, writing like a proposal for my book and reaching out to agents and getting rejected and not knowing how it was going to land. That part was scarier. But to me, it's always scary. Like, the scariest thing would be not trying.
Mm-hmm.
So, I can always lean on Renee and remind myself, like, I owe her. I feel like it's something that we owe to people that we lose too early, is that we can't live half a life. We have to live our whole lives. So whenever I would feel that way, I'd be like, gotta do it for Renee. Get back up on the horse.
Yeah, and so now you got the podcast and the book is releasing. Is there anything else that you're striving for? Is there anything next?
There will definitely be more books from me, and not just in the Nothing Much Happens universe. There are other things happening with Nothing Much Happens, though, that I can't talk about yet, but I'm very excited for. So yeah, I think just keep going. Like, every time I get messages like this every day from people who say, I haven't slept in 10 years, or I have PTSD and suddenly I'm sleeping again. That just reminds me, like, there's so many people out there who need an assist in this way. I don't want to stop until I've at least tried to reach as many people as possible. So I'm just exploring like different mediums, different ways to reach people, because not everybody will hit the same way. So just keep growing, I think.
Yeah, and I think one question I just wanted to ask,
Mm-hmm.
kind of off the wall, was, is this Seinfeld inspired anyway? The show about nothing?
I mean, I guess not inspired directly, but I always enjoyed Seinfeld.
Okay. And I always like to end on a positive something, a high note, and so much going on today that can get people down or stressed out. Kind of what's bringing a smile to your face these days?
Probably my family. I have a wonderful wife and 2 lovely dogs, and we have been in very close quarters now for 2 months. And I was saying the other day to a friend of mine that the very first time I spent a whole day with my wife, I remember driving away from her that night and thinking I could do that every day. And after 8 weeks of being together every day, I can confirm that I was right. We have a fantastic time together. She's wonderfully supportive and loving, and we spend a lot of time laughing. So I feel like this is something that I don't know if it would have happened until we retired, that we would have been allowed to have this much time together. So I feel like if you have something like that in your life to cherish it. You don't know how long you're going to be in the presence of the people you love the most. We have no guarantees. So while we're there with each other, let's be good to each other.
That's great. And thank you, Kathryn, for being on. I just want to acknowledge you for the work that you're doing and helping out people, and in a time where people need it the most to calm down and relax and be able to sleep, get a good night's rest and be refreshed. And so what you're doing is really helping people, and it shows too. You're getting the results. And so I just want to thank you and acknowledge you for that. And
I appreciate that so much. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
yeah, where should people find you online? What's the best place to connect with you?
Yeah, nothingmuchhappens.com is a good place because it'll show you the book, and it'll send you also to like our Instagram or Twitter or Facebook. I feel like those are good places to follow because not only do you get information about Nothing Much Happens, it has a really lovely community around it of people just kind of sharing their own favorite small details that make them feel happy and safe.
Great. Thanks, Kathryn.
It's been my pleasure.